Stop the insanity. Get focused on what really matters in life. Your faith, your family, your finances, and your future. Now sit back and change the trajectory of your life. This is Money for Life, brought to you by the 100-Year Savings Solution. Are you concerned about the markets? Stop taking unnecessary risks with your money while also getting great benefits. Visit us at 100yearsavings.com. Now, let's welcome your Money for Life hosts, Teresa Kuhn and Rick Sapio.
Let's talk about an experience that you had when you were in high school. You had an opportunity to go to Singularity University. At the time, they had a program for high school students that were going to go to college. And Singularity University, for those who don't know, is a program that Peter Diamandis co-founded. And Singularity University brings together the brightest minds in the world to solve major global challenges that impacts at least 1 billion people. So the premise of putting together the brightest minds in the world to solve these problems, it's a closed environment to help solve some of these problems. And some of the global challenges involved like energy and finance and air, housing. What other challenges were there, Keating?
Food scarcity, having clean water, space travel was part of that, having plans for disasters, really any challenges, right, like you said, that affect a billion people, and coming up with either a new technology or utilizing existing technologies to fight those causes.
So what did you take from that experience? And what was the experience like?
Our group was called the XYC, which was Exponential Youth Camp. And then we had about 15 kids that were under 20 years old. I think we were all under 19. And then you had 80 of the older members that either had master's degrees or were business owners themselves. We shadowed their group for a certain amount, and then they had us kind of doing our own thing. Really, I would call it another mini college experience. I think that one was probably the closest college experience that I could have gotten, just because you did have the bright minds. You had one ex-professor from UT, you had Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil that put it on. So you really had the deans, if you will, and then you had the professors as well. And you would go to your individual stations, which were basically little classes. And it was almost like a custom college because they had a list of things that they were doing, and you could almost pick your classes and pick the things that you wanted to go to each day. And then sometimes we would have field trips, and then on Saturday and Sunday we would kind of have our own break and be able to either go to San Francisco or go to different areas in San Jose. It was on NASA Ames Research Center, so that research center is world class. The things that were available to us were amazing. But really, just interacting with the very, very smart people, and the conversations were so high level. Obviously, if the entire program is high level and you're starting to dive into what each person cares about, and you can almost put them into each category where they had either previous knowledge or wanted to start developing something for one of those 10 categories. If you were interested in food or you were interested in water, you could, go through the list of people that were interested in those things too and start to pick their brains. It was a world-class experience.
And your group was also responsible for putting together ideas to solve one of these global challenges. Like part of your graduation process was, hey, here's a global problem. It impacts 1 billion people. We've got access to the greatest minds in the world, so to speak. Let's put together a solution that's going to impact 1 billion people in this challenge. And you picked food.
Correct. We each had, I think out of the 14 of us, there were probably 4 or 5 different groups. I know one of my close friends, their group was called Disaster Mesh, creating sort of a grid network for earthquake situations where you would drop a bunch of different, basically just plugins to your phones that would be able to connect to a satellite and be able to reach someone and let them know what you need, whether it be food, safety, shelter, those sort of things. One of my group members that was from Indonesia, and he had come up with the idea, at least started to come up with the idea of using large-based cricket farming and using crickets as a very cheap source of protein, and the bioavailability of using a cricket compared to a cow. You can use almost 95% of the cricket body for its nutrients. But coming in, I had gone in with the idea with aquaponics, knowing that it was at least superior in some ways to traditional farming. And I had met a gentleman from New York, and he had the idea of basically a commercial vertical farming using aquaponics. And that idea has spurred on a lot of different ideas of how to do it better than what you see going on now. That was really what we had come up with as our final plan to present to our parents and to the people that were there at the end of our 5 weeks.
Awesome. It was a super cool experience. And the experience that I had with Singularity University, I could not have been more excited for you to have been selected to be part of that program, because it was just a phenomenal program. The people that you interacted with and the campus, everything was just super, super cool. And so all of this, your first 18 years of life, you were raised different, you were taught different. This is a message from our sponsor, the 100-Year Savings Solution. Rick and I do these podcasts because we want to impact people's lives in 4 areas: their faith, their family, their finances, and their future. And with the 100-Year Savings Solution, it gives you more options to live a better life in those 4 areas. It is a specially designed whole life insurance policy that gives you more for your money than you'll ever get from a bank, a CD, or the traditional savings solution. Go to 100yearsavings.com to learn more. One thing that I talk about a lot with Money for Life is how so much of parenting is programming. At the end of the day, when you've got a child, you've got a little baby, the first 18 years of life, we're just programming them. Or if you're not programming them, the world is programming them. Part of the process is programming. I think we come with a default program. It's like a Windows 10 or an Apple iOS program, right? But we do have certain software, and then our experiences and our parenting and our siblings and our friends and our relatives and school adds to that programming. And I was aware of this. I needed to be proactive at your programming so that you'd have an operating system. And the objective was, and when I say I, of course, it's Dad and I, the objective was to raise an emotionally stable man, independent, who could bring value to the marketplace, could take care of himself financially, could have good, solid relationships with a partner, with friends, understand your gifts and your talents that you can bring to the world. Certainly God-centered, understanding that you're a spiritual being and you have a connection to something greater than yourself, what we call our creator, our God. And so that was my objective. And I love entrepreneurship. And for me, that overarching thinking was, you know what? If you could learn to be a business owner, there's so much that you can bring to the world in terms of your gifts and your talents to exchange value in the marketplace under entrepreneurship. It turned out that when you graduated from high school and you were going to college, you said, I want to study business. I want to study entrepreneurship. How do you think you came to that? Was it because you knew you didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, or it was something that came natural based on the environment that we raised you in?
I think it's definitely due to innate programming and programming through experience. I'd say having the pet sitting business and working for another company, I think that at least hammered down the idea of that I didn't really want to work for someone else the rest of my life. I think the biggest fear, at least for me, from ages 14 to 19, before I was officially ready to go down that road of college, was what am I going to start as a business? There was no idea that I had. And obviously my idea of aquaponics and vertical farming takes a lot more startup cash than a pizza joint or something of the sorts. I think there was a long time that I had wanted to own my own business, but always when you're going through day to day or week to week or year to year, the overarching theme was, what business would I start?
So when it was time for you to go to college, and my heart was heavy knowing that, hey, we're going to send you to college to live a lifestyle potentially, or be exposed to a lifestyle that we just spent 18 years raising you one way. And here we're going to sign a check, send you off to college to go live a lifestyle that at the end of the day, I really don't agree with. The partying, the alcohol, the drugs, the hooking up, the casual sex, the liberal indoctrination education, where it's very one-sided. Classical liberal education used to be a conversation, used to be an exchange of ideas, used to be like all conversations were equally respected. Today, that certainly is not the case, right? Absolutely not. It is one line of thinking. The majority think a certain way. If you're the minority in that way of thinking, you are ostracized. So when you said you're going to go to Colorado State University and study entrepreneurship and you were accepted, and my heart was so heavy, and we sat down with you and said, hey, you don't go to school to learn to be an entrepreneur. You don't go to school to learn how to be a business owner. You do it. What went through your head? Like, were you really thinking, okay, this is a path less traveled? All of your friends went to college. You spent your entire life going to college prep type of schools. You were the only one. You were considering this, thinking about this. And we've never really talked about this. Like, what were you thinking? Were you thinking like, I'm going to be missing out? My friends are going to go to college and I'm not going to have a college degree. Like, this is really weird. What were you thinking?
I think the only maybe part that I thought I was going to miss out on was more of the social role. I didn't really see not having a college degree be a hindrance. And I think that's part of the many classes that I had been to where it had almost been hammered down that there was a certain amount of the people that were on stage and very successful that did not go to college. And they, maybe didn't have near as many opportunities as some people, but they figured it out and they became successful on their own, working for other people. And then they started their own business. So I think it wasn't a foreign concept, but it still became the question of, okay, what am I going to do? I was excited. Obviously, Colorado has many benefits of the hiking and the snowboarding, and, just being in Colorado would have been some sort of experience alone outside of college. But you're right. I mean, just the mindset of a lot of people that go to school and the mindset of the schools themselves, I don't think that I would have necessarily thrived there either. And I probably knew that to some extent. If I didn't think that was the case, then I might have had a little bit more pushback.
So the fact that you had been exposed to so many other people that may not have gone to college, or so many business owners that you saw a path forward, even though the path wasn't entirely clear. You did go to multiple business finishing school conferences with Rick Sapio, Peter Diamandis, right? I mean, an exceptional entrepreneur that's been involved in all sorts of things. I mean, you were surrounded by really big thinkers and business owners that had accomplished a whole lot. So when we sat down and we made this decision to go to the alternative path, and we said, look, we've been studying service industries, and we think the air conditioning and heating industry is a niche that you'll always have the ability to have customers and have a business and bring value to the marketplace. It's a dirty business. It's not one of those like programming type of businesses or IT businesses or, clean white collar businesses. It was more of a blue collar business. And we said to you, we can take your college money and start the business in 2 years, but you have to do an apprenticeship first for 2 years in order to learn the business so that you could be the first technician. What do you think of that? Because you weren't really mechanically inclined and you really weren't raised doing a whole lot with your hands besides pet sitting, right? Like, you weren't out there being a handyman. You did have aquaponics, and you did have the aquaponics that you built and worked on, but it wasn't like you weren't a handyman, so to speak.
Right. Fundamentally, just definitely not a handyman. And I don't think I was mechanically inclined or really knew a lot about mechanics themselves. The only thing that I would have known that needed to be worked on would have been a car. I don't think I really understood, when you walk into a grocery store, how many trades have their hands on many different parts of a grocery store, or just even a house being built, how many different things go into place for that. So I think almost I was tricked a little bit just in the fact that I did not know what I was getting into, and I could not see past the first step, going to the school that I went to just to get the technician and EPA license. I didn't see anything after that. All I knew was just the one thing in front of me.
That's really funny. You felt tricked. Well, we didn't trick you. We did say, trust us, because we could see the bigger picture, right? But certainly there was no trickery involved. And it was pretty cool. You had your father who said, hey, if we're going to do this as a family project, as a family business, I'm going to do this alongside with you and take EPA licensing course along with you. So you did do it with your father. And so at that time, you couldn't see the potential of the business. You did the school, you graduated with your father, and it was pretty funny. Your father is an electrical engineer, and he ended up putting together some study manuals for you and your classmates. And so it was a pretty cool project for you guys. How was that, taking that class with your father?
And it was great. I think he had a deeper understanding, at least, about what actually goes on in the world. And obviously, with his electrical engineering background, there's a lot of things of HVAC that deal with electronics in general, whether it be relays or switches or, running wires in parallel or series, that he was able to at least put some input and help dumb down the experience. But yeah, I remember taking notes on a computer in class and taking the formulas that we would be given and creating study manuals and handing it to the rest of the class for the test, and basically just trying to lift everyone up.
And that's super cool. And as it turned out, he did such a good job that the school offered him a job to teach, which is pretty funny. And that's not the path that he wanted to go down. So, wow. And then what happened from there was you got a job, and the deal was you do 2 years of an apprenticeship. You learn the technical part of the business, and then we take your college money and start the business. How was that experience working for those 2 years?
Different, for sure. I think that's really where I noticed the biggest difference between my life and my friend's life. I believe I started in January, and the first couple months were basically it was like an ocean of information. And as I started to at least get a little bit more handy and understand the role of what I was filling in for, working with the guys that had been there for 20, 30 years and that had worked with their fathers when they were 9, 10, 11 years old, and running calls with them and getting all of their shared experience. I think that the first company that I worked for, it was big 20 to 25 commercial refrigeration, 25 person or field technician company with commercial refrigeration that we were doing all the way from residential ACs in some scenarios, all the way to, water chilled units and ammonia units and full refrigeration rack, compressor racks on top of HEBs or Targets or Walmart supercenters. So it was just an ocean of information that I was trying to sort through. And then also still trying to have fun with friends and still trying to have some sort of social life. When I noticed the biggest difference was June, July, when I was working 90-hour weeks. I was working so much and making so much money, and I did not have time to spend it, and would get texts from friends at 7, 8 o'clock at night, like, hey, are you going to come over? It's like, I'm still working. Would work till 1 or 2 o'clock at night, wake up at 8, 9 a.m. and get right back to work, and then work another 12, 13, 14-hour shift. That was a very challenging, I would say that job specifically was a very challenging year, and next job too was equally as challenging.
You have just experienced the Money for Life podcast, brought to you by the 100-Year Savings Solution. Implement these strategies today and create a life by design. For more information, visit 100yearsavings.com. Have a blessed day.